The road ended 3 miles ago. But Ethan Vale kept driving anyway. The tires of his old Jeep dragged through wet mud as towering black trees swallowed the headlights one by one. His camera sat on the dashboard, recording everything. "This place doesn't exist on any map," Ethan said into the lens with a nervous smile. "People call it the Silent Forest. No birds, no insects, no sound." Victor Kane laughed from the passenger seat. "Perfect place for a horror video." Ethan tried laughing too, but the deeper they drove, the heavier the air became. Even the engine sounded distant now, like the forest was swallowing noise itself. Then suddenly, silence. The Jeep engine died. No wind, no breathing, nothing. Victor frowned. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Exactly." Ethan stepped out first. Thick fog crawled between the trees like pale fingers. He could see their mouths moving, but every sound felt muted, trapped inside his skull. Even their footsteps made no noise against the ground. Victor adjusted the camera. "This is insane." Ahead of them stood an old wooden sign half covered in moss. "No sound after sunset. Leave before dark." Someone had scratched another sentence underneath. "It hers you think." Victor forced a grin. "Okay, that's creepy." Ethan kept filming as they walked deeper into the forest. Every tree looked twisted, almost human. The silence pressed harder against their ears the farther they went. Then Ethan noticed something strange. No echoes. He snapped his fingers beside his head. Nothing. Not even the smallest click. Victor suddenly stopped walking. "What?" Ethan asked. Victor's face had gone pale. "There's someone behind us." Ethan turned quickly. Nobody. Only trees. But one tree looked wrong. Its bark almost resembled a face stretching outward from the trunk, mouth wide open in a frozen scream. Victor whispered, "I swear I saw a woman standing there." Ethan lifted the camera toward the darkness. That's when the screen glitched. For one frame, a pale woman appeared between the trees. Long black hair, white eyes, smiling directly at them. The image vanished instantly. Victor grabbed Ethan's arm. "Tell me you saw that." Before Ethan could answer, they both froze. Footprints, fresh footprints in the mud ahead of them. Bare feet. But the tracks didn't walk forward. They walked backward, deeper into the forest. Then Ethan noticed something worse. The footprints suddenly stopped, as if whoever made them had simply vanished. Victor slowly looked up. High above them, hidden among the branches, someone was watching. The figure in the trees didn't move. Ethan raised the camera with shaking hands, zooming into the darkness above them. Branches twisted together like spider legs, hiding most of the shape, but he could still make out pale skin wrapped around the trunk. Human skin. Victor stepped backward slowly. "We should leave. Right now." For the first time in years, Ethan agreed. They turned toward the Jeep and stopped cold. The path behind them was gone. Only endless trees remained. "No," Ethan whispered. Victor spun in circles. "We came from this direction. I know we did." But the forest had changed. The trees now stood closer together, their branches locking overhead like prison bars. Thick fog swallowed everything more than 10 feet away. Then Ethan heard something impossible. A whisper, not through his ears, inside his head. "You should not have entered." Ethan grabbed his temple painfully. Victor looked terrified too. "You heard that?" Before Ethan answered, a flashlight beam suddenly cut through the fog. Officer Daniel Reeves emerged from the darkness holding an old hunting rifle. His beard was soaked with rain, and his eyes looked exhausted. "You idiots picked the worst night possible," he muttered. Victor nearly collapsed with relief. "Thank God. We got lost." Daniel didn't answer immediately. He stared at the trees around them instead. "You're not lost," he said quietly. "The forest just doesn't want you leaving." A deep chill spread through Ethan's body. Daniel led them through the woods without speaking. Somehow he knew exactly where to walk. After several minutes, they reached a small cabin hidden between massive trees. Inside, lanterns flickered against cracked wooden walls. Maps, old newspaper clippings, and missing person posters covered an entire table. Ethan's stomach tightened. There were dozens, children, campers, hikers, tourists, all missing near the same forest. Victor pointed toward one photo and froze. That girl. Ethan looked closer. Maya Thorne, his ex-girlfriend, missing for 3 years. The room suddenly felt smaller. Daniel noticed Ethan's reaction immediately. You knew her? Ethan nodded slowly. She disappeared here? Daniel leaned against the wall heavily. Everyone who enters after sunset hears the whispers eventually. Some run deeper into the forest on their own. Others... He paused. Others are taken. Victor laughed nervously. Taken by what? Daniel looked toward the window. Something moved outside. Tall, thin, watching. You ever notice how silence becomes painful after a while? Daniel asked quietly. That's because the human brain was never meant to hear nothing. This forest feeds on that silence. After enough time, it starts replacing reality inside your head. A sudden knock slammed against the cabin door. All 3 of them jumped. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel's face lost all color. Do not open that door, he whispered. Another knock echoed through the cabin, slow, patient. Then came a woman's voice, soft, broken. Ethan? His blood turned to ice. It was Maya's voice, and she sounded terrified. Ethan rushed toward the door before Daniel grabbed him violently. That's not her, Daniel hissed, but the voice outside sounded exactly like Maya. Ethan, please. Victor stared at the door, breathing hard. How is that possible? Another knock shook the cabin, then silence again. Ethan's heart pounded so hard he could barely think. 3 years ago, Maya vanished during a solo hiking trip. No body, no evidence, nothing. And now her voice stood just outside the cabin walls. Daniel slowly pulled the curtains aside. The porch was empty. Rain poured from the black sky, soaking the wooden steps. But there was nobody there. Then Ethan noticed something in the mud. Bare footprints, backward footprints, leading away from the cabin. Victor whispered, "No chance. Absolutely no chance." The lanterns suddenly flickered, one by one, until only darkness filled the room. The silence returned instantly. Heavy, violent. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat inside his skull. Then came the whisper again, closer this time. She's waiting for you. Victor switched on the camera light with trembling fingers. The beam cut across the cabin and stopped on the far corner. Someone stood there. A tall woman with tangled black hair covering her face. Water dripped from her pale skin onto the floorboards soundlessly. Ethan froze. Maya? The woman slowly lifted her head. White eyes, no pupils. Her jaw stretched open wider than humanly possible as she smiled. Victor screamed and stumbled backward. The creature lunged. Daniel fired the rifle instantly. The blast lit up the cabin like lightning, but the creature vanished before the bullet hit. The walls began shaking violently. Whispers flooded the room from every direction. Hundreds of voices, crying, begging, screaming. Ethan dropped to his knees, covering his ears even though there was no actual sound. The voices existed only inside his mind. Daniel grabbed him. "It's trying to break you, don't listen!" Victor pointed toward the wall in horror. The missing person photos were moving. Every face on the wall slowly turned toward Ethan. Their mouths opened together. "Join us!" Blood suddenly trickled from Victor's nose. He stared blankly at the darkness near the ceiling. "She's up there," he whispered. Before anyone could stop him, Victor walked toward the cabin door and opened it. Cold fog exploded inside. "Victor!" Ethan shouted. But Victor kept walking into the forest like someone pulling invisible strings attached to his body. Daniel cursed and chased after him. Ethan followed seconds later. Outside, the forest looked different now. The trees were taller, bent inward, almost alive. Victor disappeared between the fog-covered trunks ahead. Then Ethan heard crying nearby. A little girl stood beside one of the trees, around 8 years old, pale skin, empty white eyes. "Help me," she whispered inside his mind. Dozens of shadowy children slowly emerged behind her. The hollow children. Every missing victim the forest had taken. And standing behind them all was Maya, smiling. Ethan couldn't move. Maya stood between the trees wearing the same dark jacket she disappeared in 3 years ago. Rain slid down her pale face as she smiled unnaturally wide. The hollow children surrounded her silently, watching, waiting. Victor walked toward them like a sleepwalker, his eyes unfocused and empty. "Victor!" Ethan shouted, grabbing his arm. Victor stopped for 1 second, then slowly turned his head. Blood leaked from both ears. "She says the forest remembers everything," he whispered. "She says we can stay forever." Daniel raised his rifle carefully. "Don't look into their eyes." But Ethan already had. The moment Maya stared at him, memories exploded through his mind. Maya entering the forest years ago, the whispers guiding her deeper, the silence crushing her thoughts until she couldn't tell reality from nightmares. Then Ethan saw something worse. Beneath the forest floor were thousands of bodies tangled in massive black roots. The trees weren't trees at all. They were feeding on people. Every missing victim had become part of the forest itself. The whisper returned inside Ethan's skull. "We keep them alive." The ground suddenly moved beneath their feet. Roots burst upward like snakes, wrapping around Victor's legs and dragging him screaming into the mud. Ethan grabbed his hands desperately, but the roots pulled harder. Victor stared directly at him. Then his screaming stopped. Not because he died, because the forest stole his sound. His mouth remained open in complete silence as he disappeared beneath the earth. Ethan collapsed backward in horror. Daniel fired wildly into the trees as shadowy figures rushed through the fog around them. "Run!" Daniel screamed. They sprinted blindly through the darkness while the forest twisted around them. Trees shifted positions, branches reached like claws. Human faces stretched from the bark, silently screaming as Ethan passed. Then Daniel suddenly stopped. Ahead of them stood the old warning sign from the entrance. No sound after sunset. Leave before dark. Daylight glowed faintly beyond the trees. "We're close!" Ethan shouted. But Daniel didn't move. A black root had pierced straight through his stomach. Blood poured down his jacket. Daniel looked down weakly before forcing the rifle into Ethan's hands. "Don't let it follow you out." The roots dragged him backward slowly into the fog. Daniel kept firing until the darkness swallowed him completely. Ethan ran. Branches tore his skin apart as he sprinted toward the light. The whispers screamed inside his head now. "Stay! Stay! Stay!" He burst out of the forest just as the sun rose. Instantly, sound returned. Wind, birds, his own breathing. Ethan collapsed beside the road, sobbing violently. Hours later, rescuers found him alone. No sign of Victor, no sign of Daniel, no forest. Because behind Ethan, there were only empty mountains. The silent forest had vanished. But weeks later, when Ethan reviewed the final camera footage, his blood turned cold. At the very end of the recording, just behind him in his apartment window, Maya was standing silently in the dark, smiling.